Am I the asshole for running away from an allegedly autistic friend? So, me, 18F, and my two other friends, 18F, has been somewhat friends with another girl, Emma, 18F. She was introduced by another girl who was no longer in the friend group herself and also didn't particularly like the girl. Our first impressions of Emma was that she is noticeably loud, but we let it slide for a year. However, in this year, she has been doing a lot of embarrassing things, like physically dragging a chair to the board and then rubbing off some other kid's mistake, then coming towards me and laughing as if I agreed to this. Other than that, she frequently interrupts others from talking as well as correct teachers and asks stupid questions. I have told her multiple times, giving the hints subtly and giving her the hints straight up. It has gotten to the point where the majority of the class are talking bad about her. I've heard multiple talk about her even out of school premises. She is also entitled by laughing at other students' mistakes and takes it personally since he responded back to her. It's gotten to the point where me and my friends moved from our usual hangout spot in hope she gets the hint. However, when she found the area, she came near us. We tried to find an excuse to leave by going shopping, but she kept persisting to come with us. Although immature, we eventually ended up getting our bags and physically running away. I agree this move was wrong. However, this girl is social suicide and we have told her multiple times our opinion and to be quite politely, yet she still persists. So am I the asshole? Let me back up, because when I type it out like that, even I can see how cold it looks. Running away from someone, literally grabbing your bag and bolting. It sounds cruel when it's stripped down to a sentence, but there's a full year of context underneath that moment, and I think you need to understand the weight of it before you decide how to feel about me. It started the September before last. Emma was brought into our circle by a girl named Courtney, who had been drifting from our group for months before she finally disappeared entirely. Courtney and I had never been particularly close. We were friendly in that surface-level way where you sit together at lunch and share notes, but wouldn't text each other on a weekend. So when she showed up one afternoon with Emma in tow, introducing her like she was presenting some kind of gift, I didn't feel like I had the right to say much. Neither did my friends Jade or Brianna. Emma was loud. That was the first thing I noticed, and I don't mean loud in the way some people are when they're excited or comfortable in a space. I mean loud in the way that makes the air in a room feel thinner. She laughed at full volume in the hallway, talked over people mid-sentence like their words had a timer on them, and made observations about everything with the confidence of someone who had never once been told they were wrong. I remember watching her that first day and thinking, okay, she's just nervous. New environment. She'll settle down. She didn't settle down. By October, Jade had already started doing that thing where she'd glance at me sideways whenever Emma said something particularly jarring. A specific look, eyebrows slightly raised, lips pressed together, that said everything without saying anything. Brianna was more patient than either of us, always the peacekeeper, always the one to redirect or soften. But even Brianna started going quiet in a certain way whenever Emma got going. The chair incident was the one that broke something in me. We were in English class and one of the quieter boys in our row, a kid named Derek, had written an answer on the board that the teacher had gently marked as incorrect. It wasn't a big deal. The teacher moved on. But Emma, without being asked, without any prompting from anyone, stood up, dragged her chair to the front of the room with a scrape that cut through every conversation in the room and erased Derek's answer. Not quietly. Not apologetically. She erased it with this sort of theatrical efficiency, like she was performing a public service. Then she turned around and walked back toward our section of the room, caught my eye, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed one. A laugh that was looking for a co-conspirator. I did not laugh back. I looked down at my notebook and felt my face go hot with secondhand shame. And also something else. Something closer to dread. Because Derek looked mortified. And everyone else in the room had that stunned, slightly horrified expression that people get when they witness something they can't quite categorize, and Emma didn't notice any of it. She sat down, satisfied. That was when I first understood that this wasn't going to fix itself. I want to be fair. I genuinely do. In the months that followed, I heard through the quiet channels of school gossip that Emma might be autistic, or at least that she'd been assessed for something when she was younger. I don't know if that's true. I'm not a doctor, I'm 18, and I'm not in a position to diagnose anyone. But I do know that whatever the reason for her behavior, it created real, consistent consequences for the people around her, and I had to sit with that knowledge and figure out what to do with it. I tried being direct. The first time, I softened it as much as I could. We were walking between classes, and she had just interrupted Brianna 3 times in the span of one conversation, and when Brianna finally gave up trying to finish her sentence and went quiet, I said to Emma, gently, that it was important to let people finish talking before jumping in. I said it the way you'd say it to a child you cared about. Emma blinked at me, said, "Oh, I know, I just get excited," and then 40 seconds later interrupted Jade mid-sentence. The second time, I was less gentle. It was after an incident in the cafeteria where she laughed loudly at a mistake another student made. A girl named Sophie who had tripped and dropped her tray and who was clearly embarrassed and close to tears. Emma thought it was funny. She didn't bother to check whether Sophie thought it was funny. I pulled Emma aside afterward and told her directly that laughing at people when they were embarrassed wasn't okay, that it hurt people's feelings, and that it was making things uncomfortable for everyone. She looked at me with this expression I could never quite read, somewhere between defensive and genuinely puzzled, and said, I wasn't making fun of her, I just thought it was kind of funny. And then she looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. That was the moment I started to understand the particular exhaustion of trying to communicate with someone who receives your words but doesn't absorb them. By February, the social damage was visible. I overheard a group of juniors talking about her in the bathroom, not in whispers, in full voices, with a cruelty that made me uncomfortable even though I understood exactly where it was coming from. Teachers had started responding to her questions with a tightness around their eyes that they couldn't quite hide. One teacher, Mrs. Calloway, who was famously patient and kind, had started gently redirecting Emma's questions to after class with a frequency that everyone noticed. The boy Emma had publicly humiliated at the board, Derek, actively rerouted his path through the hallways to avoid passing our section of the classroom. I noticed that. It bothered me more than I let on. And through all of it, Emma remained oblivious. Or if she wasn't oblivious, she was performing obliviousness so completely that there was no difference. She kept laughing too loud, kept finishing other people's sentences, kept pulling out wrong answers in class with the certainty of someone who had never second-guessed themselves and didn't intend to start. She attached herself to our group with an ease that I found genuinely bewildering, considering how little warmth we were giving her at this point. Jade had stopped engaging almost entirely. Brianna was still polite, but had the worn look of someone who'd been fighting a losing battle. And I was stuck somewhere in the middle, feeling responsible for a situation I hadn't chosen and didn't know how to exit cleanly. The hangout spot migration was Jade's idea. We had claimed a particular corner of the courtyard near the arts building as ours in sophomore year. It had a specific bench, a specific angle of afternoon sun, and was far enough from the main foot traffic that we could actually have conversations without performing for an audience. When we started showing up there and Emma started materializing within 10 minutes every single time, Jade suggested we simply relocate, move somewhere she didn't know, reset the geography of our social life and hope she didn't find us. It bought us 2 weeks, maybe 3. And then one Tuesday afternoon, I was mid-sentence telling Brianna something about my weekend, and I heard it. That voice, carrying across the courtyard at a volume designed for a much larger space, and I looked up, and there was Emma, scanning the area. And then her eyes landed on us and she waved like she'd found something she'd been looking for. The shopping excuse was mine. I said it fast before she'd fully reached us. Oh, we were just about to head out. We need to grab some stuff from the shops. I said it with a smile I'd had a lot of practice manufacturing by that point. Emma's face shifted into that expression she always got when she was calculating whether she fit into a situation. And then she said, "Oh, I can come. I need to get something anyway." And I felt it then. That particular desperation that I'm not proud of. The kind that bypasses rational thought and goes straight to animal instinct. Because we tried every reasonable approach. We tried kindness. We tried directness. We tried directness. We tried directness. We tried distance and she'd followed. We tried the slow fade and she'd held on. Every exit we constructed she walked through. And in that moment, standing in that courtyard with the sun going flat and Jade staring at her shoes and Brianna's mouth pressed into a thin line, I made a decision. I looked at Jade. She looked at me. Something passed between us that wasn't spoken and didn't need to be. I picked up my bag. Jade picked up hers. Brianna hesitated for 1 second, because Brianna always hesitates. That's who she is. And then she picked up hers too. And we walked. Fast. And then because fast wasn't going to be enough, we ran. Not dramatically. Not in a movie way. Just 3 18-year-olds moving through a courtyard at a pace that made clear we were not waiting, not turning around, not available. I didn't look back. I don't know why. Maybe because I was afraid of what I'd see. Emma standing there watching us go in that confused way she had. Or worse, Emma laughing, not realizing what had just happened. Either option felt unbearable for different reasons. We didn't talk about it until we were 2 blocks away and my lungs were reminding me that I did not run regularly. Brianna said, "That was awful." She wasn't wrong. Jade said nothing, just walked with her jaw set in that way she does when she's made peace with something. I said, "I know," and meant it, and also meant something else underneath it. Something like, "But what were we supposed to do?" Because that's the question I've been sitting with ever since. Not whether what we did was unkind. It was. I know that. Running away from someone is a childish and cowardly response, and I own that completely. But I've been through the catalog of every other option, and I keep coming back to the same wall. We told her more than once, more than twice, in soft language and in plain language. We repositioned ourselves. We made ourselves unavailable in every way we could think of that didn't involve saying the actual words. "Emma, we don't want to be your friends," because saying those words felt too brutal to put into someone's face. And maybe that was the real failure. Maybe the kindest thing would have been to just say it, clearly, once, and absorb the discomfort of her reaction. Maybe dancing around it for a year was its own form of cruelty, stringing someone along while we quietly withdrew. I've thought about that a lot. I'm still thinking about it. What I know is this. I'm 18 years old and I'm not equipped to manage someone else's social development. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a teacher. I'm a kid who wanted to get through senior year without dreading every afternoon in the courtyard, and I reached a point where I ran out of options that felt available to me, and I picked the worst one out of exhaustion, and I felt strange about it ever since. So, am I the asshole? Probably a little. We all were in that moment. But I don't think it started there. I think it started a year ago, in a situation none of us chose, that none of us knew how to navigate, and that nobody, not us, not Emma, not the teachers watching from the edges, ever found a way to fix. And I'm still not sure anyone could have. Prof.